We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is another film session edition of the Glory UGA podcast here on YouTube. And man, Saturday night was a rough night for all the Mike Bobo haters out there, both outside and within the Georgia fan base, as Mike Bobo gave the proverbial middle finger to all of his many detractors out there across the country, leading the Georgia offense to put up 453 yards of offense, 6.4 yards per play, and 31 points against a Tennessee defense that came into Saturday's game fifth nationally in total defense, giving up only 271 yards a game, third nationally in yards per play, allowing only 4.23 yards per play, and also a Tennessee defense that, oh yeah, by the way, had not given up more than 19 points in any other game all season long. And it wasn't just the most points that the Volunteer defense had given up. It was also the most yards per play, and the most passing yards that the Tennessee defense had given up in any single game. Yeah, Mike Bobo, that guy, who, in my opinion, has been the most egregious victim of confirmation bias within the Georgia fan base since Stetson Bennett. He went out and lit up a top 10 Tennessee defense. But wait, I can hear it. I can hear the haters now. Tyler, that's just one game. That doesn't prove anything. Well, all right. I hear you. How about this? That's now not one, not two, but three defenses that are currently, right now, ranked inside the top 10 nationally in scoring defense that Mike Bobo has put up at least 30 points against. Yeah, that Mike Bobo and his allegedly pathetic Georgia offense have put up 30 or more points on the Bama defense, which is currently 10th nationally in scoring defense, 34 points against Bama. The Texas defense, which is right now 4th nationally in scoring defense, put up 30 points on them. And now, obviously, Tennessee, 8th nationally in scoring defense, even after that game, 31 points on Tennessee. If you throw in Auburn, throw in that game, well, that's 4 top 20 defenses that Georgia has put up at least 30 points on, of course, led by Mike Bobo as the primary play caller for the Georgia offense. Now, sure, I know, I can hear you. Sure, yes, we have to acknowledge there's also that Ole Miss game in there too. All right, we know only 10 points against Ole Miss, but let's also consider the context there. I think you can make a strong argument that might just be the best defense in the entire country. And right now, guys, that Ole Miss defense is top 5 nationally in both scoring defense and yards per play allowed. They're second nationally in rush defense, and they lead the nation by wide margins in both sacks and tackles for loss. It was a bad look, no doubt about it. There's also some context there. There are injuries that we've been dealing with injuries all year long, but certainly in the offensive line, with the injuries that we had, and kind of a rotating situation on the offensive line, just kind of a revolving door of guys, and have a number of guys that just aren't healthy against probably the best defensive line in the country. That's a recipe for disaster. You get behind early, the running game kind of gets taken out of the equation. You can start throwing the football, and those elite pass rushers, they've got multiple elite pass rushers putting their ears back. They can come after you, and it's tough. It's tough going. And when your offensive line performs like you did in that game, with the injury situation being a big part of that, but regardless, when the offensive line just simply can't block anyone, as I showcased last week in the film session video, which if you haven't checked that out, go check that out. It's tough to call plays, man. I don't care who you are. What do you do? Can't run block, can't pass block. I mean, what do you do as a play caller? But sure, that game's in there too. But look, I know what the haters are going to do. I know the haters are going to point to that game as evidence that Mike Bobo just sucks. I know. But when you do that, you're making my point for me. You're making my point for me. So there's 3 games against top 10 defense that I laid out that Mike Bobo has put up at least 30 points against. 4 games, throwing Auburn, against top 20 defenses that we put up at least 30 points. But hey, there's that one game. There was that one game against maybe the best defense in the country where his offense only put up 10 points. And that means, with that one data point, that one single data point, well, that's clear evidence. That's all the evidence we need that Mike Bobo sucks and he has to be fired. He can't be back as Georgia's offensive coordinator next year. Guys, that is the definition of confirmation bias, where you're actively searching for information to back up firmly held preconceptions that, quite frankly, just aren't really rooted in reality, while willfully ignoring overwhelming direct evidence to the contrary. That is the definition of confirmation bias. So if you're going to point out Ole Miss and that's your evidence for why Mike Bobo sucks, you're just kind of making my point for me. And this is a guy who I don't really understand coming into this year where this hate comes from. This is a guy who last year, a year ago, spearheaded a Georgia offense that put up almost 500 yards a game, finished the season top 5 nationally in total offense, yards per play offensively, and scoring offense, despite not having Brock Bowers, who's tearing up the NFL right now, and Ladd McConkey for half the season each, had a brand new starting quarterback in Carson Beck, a mash unit at running back to the point that we had to take a wide receiver in Dylan Bell and make him one of our top 3 running backs last year and use him liberally as a running back, and a first-round right tackle, Demarius Mims, that also missed half the season. So despite all that context, he still led an offense that put up almost 500 yards a game. Top 5 nationally in every major statistical category. And it's not just last season, guys. And I know, last season, well, he's not Todd Monken. We didn't win a national title. And I guess the only difference is, well, we didn't have Todd Monken, so it must be Mike Bobo's fault, even though the offense produced at an extraordinarily high level. And it was actually the defense that didn't hold up its end of the bargain a year ago. And if you go back to his first tenure at Georgia, back in the Mark Richt era, up until 2022, which was probably the best offense in Georgia history, with Stetson Bennett coming back for his final season, Todd Monken calling the shots, great offense, unbelievable, no doubt about it. But up until that season, Mike Bobo, the guy everyone has been wanting fired all year, that guy had produced the highest scoring offense in Georgia history with Hudson freaking Mason as the quarterback. Hudson Mason, 2014. And beyond that, Mike Bobo still today has 2 of the 3 highest yards per play averages in Georgia history in 2012 and then last year in 2023. But none of that matters. Apparently, none of that matters because there is a certain segment of the Georgia fan base who once upon a time made up their mind that he sucked back in 2009 when he was first taking over play calling. I guess it was 2007, 2008, 2009. But people made up their mind back then, 15 plus years ago, that he just wasn't good enough. And here in 2024, there's a certain segment of the Georgia fan base that just stubbornly clings to those views year after year. Because let's just be honest, man, you just can't stand to admit that they were wrong. That's what it comes down to. Look, I love you guys. I love everyone out there. I'm a George guy through and through, and no one gets it right all the time. I miss plenty of things, guys. Like, we get some right, we get some wrong. It's part of the deal. And you're welcome to think what you want. Who am I to tell you what to think? I'm just giving you my opinion here and asking you to just have an open mind when we're thinking about Mike Bobo. But I will say this. You can think what you want, but a little objectivity when you're making up your mind on these things could go a really long way. And I'll give you this. Honestly, the haters weren't necessarily wrong back when they initially made their mind up about Mike Bobo. There was a time early in his career as an offensive play caller where he was learning on the job, where it wasn't always great. It wasn't always late. 2009, 2010, not always great there. I would argue there in Murray, 2011, certainly 2012, 2013, awesome. 2014, by the time Mike Bobo left Georgia, the guy was elite. He was putting up the best offenses in the history of Georgia football at that point. And then, obviously offenses evolved since then. But at that point, those offenses were the best that Georgia had ever seen. I mean, statistically, go back and look at it. Now, early on, I'll give you that. Early on, he was learning on the job, and you weren't necessarily wrong when you first made up your mind. If you hate Mike Bobo, if you're one of the haters, you weren't necessarily wrong when you made up your mind about him initially back then. Where the haters went wrong is in their steadfast unwillingness to allow their opinions to evolve. As Mike Bobo has evolved, as he has improved as a play caller, as an offensive coordinator, as more evidence began to emerge that maybe, just maybe, this guy might not suck. Maybe, just maybe, he's actually kind of good at his job. Maybe, just maybe, he's a really good offensive coordinator if you really peel back the layers and have an open mind about it. And look, guys, I know all the talking points that people use against Mike Bobo. I've been running this Georgia podcast for 10 years. And if you're just new to the podcast, find this video for the first time, make sure to check out the Glory UGA podcast on the audio side of things for a lot more coverage of Georgia football. Got 4 episodes a week during the football season. We never go dark. Got 2-3 episodes all season, every week, all season long. So a ton of great content for you guys. It's not just Georgia football, but Georgia basketball, baseball, the whole 9 yards, right? So I run a Georgia podcast. I live in Athens. I'm a Georgia guy. That's who I am, all right? So I'm very, very well aware of all the talking points that people use against Mike Bobo. So let's go there. Let's debunk some of the biggest talking points that I continuously hear people throw out to suggest that Mike Bobo should be fired and that Mike Bobo is not good enough for Georgia, to support their opinion that he is just not the guy. Well, number one thing I always hear about him is that Mike Bobo is only good when he has elite talent. Well, first off, let's just say this. If the contention is that Mike Bobo has to have elite talent in order to put up big numbers offensively, I think you can apply that same logic to essentially every play caller, I don't know, ever. I mean, guys, look at Lincoln Riley this year. This offensive genius, this guy who has this reputation as an offensive mastermind, one of the greatest offensive minds of our generation. Y'all watch USC this year? What's he done? What's he done without Caleb Williams? What's he done without Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield? What's he done without an elite quarterback? Yeah, even the best play callers. Like, of course you're better when you have elite players. That's the truth for any offensive coordinator. Who out there is the same guy, same play caller they are. They put up the same number of yards when you go from Caleb Williams to Miller Moss. That person doesn't exist, man. Like, that's true of everyone. Phil Longo, I know that's not a big name, but Phil Longo just got fired from Wisconsin as their OC. When he was at North Carolina with Sam Howell and Drake May, all those guys, putting up massive numbers. When you go to Wisconsin, all of a sudden, now you got Braden Locke as a backup quarterback, and we're not putting up those numbers. Well, you're not the same. All of a sudden, you don't get the same guy, but you're still the same coordinator. You have to have players to put up big numbers. Anyone has to have those. Josh Heupel has made this reputation in Tennessee as this another offensive mastermind. How good has their offense been the past 2 years? Last year, fine, but certainly not what it was in 2022 when they had Hendon Hooker. Not with Joe Milton. This year, with Nico Imaliava, taking a fall, they've basically fallen off the cliff offensively. Like, we saw it firsthand here in Athens. We had them like 312 yards of offense. It's not the same Tennessee offense, but no one talks about Josh Heupel like that because the recognition is, he doesn't have those kind of players right now. But when it's Mike Bobo, it's like, he just sucks. If he doesn't have elite players, he sucks. You can say the same thing about anybody. Really. Todd Monken, like the guy that everyone loves, the sacred cow of the Georgia fan base. I love Todd Monken. Great coordinator. But, he's getting some heat right now in the NFL. There's a lot of Baltimore Ravens fans. They're not happy with him. He's got Lamar Jackson, but his receiving core is not extremely talented. And so they're not putting up consistently the kind of numbers that you would expect from a Todd Monken offense because it doesn't have the same players. It's that simple. That's what it comes down to. So you can say that about anybody. And while, it is true that Georgia has not put up the same numbers offensively this year as it did last year, let's go back to context. I just told you earlier, guys, we've played 4 top 10 scoring defenses nationally. We played 5 in the top 20. We've only played 1 game so far against a team that's not in the Power 4. Of course, our offensive numbers are not going to be as good, but we're still putting up more points against these top defenses than anyone else they played has all year long. We're still doing that. And look, we certainly don't have elite talent at the skill positions this year, guys. Like wide receiver, tight end, we don't have the same kind of guys. But again, as I just said, we're still putting up more points than anyone on Texas, Tennessee, and Auburn. We put up more points on those 3 teams than any other team has scored this year. We put up the second most points on Bama. We put up 34 on Bama. Vanderbilt put up 40 on Bama. But that was by far 34 points, by far the most that Bama has given up at home all year long. So while the production might not be exactly the same as it was a year ago, there's context there, and we still are producing at a high level, even without Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. And also, again, last year, we produced at a high level offensively, even when those guys were out. Both those guys missed essentially half the year last year. The next talking point I hear a lot to argue against Mike Bobo is that, just look at South Carolina, look at Auburn. He sucked there. Why did we think when we hired him he was going to be good here? Guys, are we holding a COVID year against Mike Bobo? what? We're holding the COVID year against Mike Bobo? Like, why don't we hold the COVID year against Todd Monken? Because our 2020 offense wasn't nearly what it was in 21 and 22, but we don't do that because we understand, oh yeah, it was COVID. Like, we didn't have a full offseason to implement the offense. But when it's Mike Bobo, it doesn't really, that logic doesn't fit our narrative. So we just say, oh yeah, well, South Carolina sucked. Like, why would you want to hire that guy? He was terrible at South Carolina. Guys, it was a COVID year. And then the head coach gets fired halfway through the year, and all of a sudden now Mike Bobo's not just the OC, he's the interim head coach with all the duties that go along with that. So that's a much bigger job than he signed up for. I don't buy that at all. Then you want to hold Auburn against him. The Auburn job with a dysfunctional coaching staff under Brian Harsin. Brian Harsin, who, by the way, just wouldn't let Mike Bobo really run the offense he wanted to run. There's a lot of friction there. You can hold that against him if you want. That's fine. But come on, again, consider the context. You can point those seasons, but if you point those seasons as evidence that Mike Bobo sucks, which is you're right, that's fine, you're ignoring the context. And by ignoring the context, again, you're making my point for me. That is simply confirmation bias. One argument that I've heard a lot in the past year and a half or so is a question. I see this posed a lot on social media, on message boards. Is Mike Bobo the best offensive coordinator Georgia can hire? It's like people throw that they throw that rhetorical question at you and think that ends the conversation. Because, obviously the answer is no. But my question to you would be, who is the guy? Then tell me, who is it? Who is the best coordinator that Georgia can actually go out and get right now? Do you want to try to lure Todd Monken back? Like, fine, if you want to do that, fine. I'm cool with that, but that ship's probably already sailed. And the guy I hear a lot in reference to who people would prefer to have instead of Mike Bobo, if we were to part ways with Mike Bobo, is Buster Faulkner. Like, he's the guy that's on the tip of a lot of Georgia fans' tongues right now because he was here as an analyst for a long time. And then he goes to Georgia Tech down the road to a rival, and he's helped revive their offense, revive their program. You hear his name a lot. And look, guys, I think Buster Faulkner is a great coordinator. I think he's a really, really good football coach. But if you fire Mike Bobo and then you hire Buster Faulkner, I will ask you the exact same question that you asked me. Is Buster Faulkner really the best coordinator that Georgia can get? I mean, what makes you think he's better than Mike Bobo? What? Because his name's not Mike Bobo? Well, statistically, the last 2 years, he hasn't put up as many points or as many yards per play as Mike Bobo has. He hasn't. Now you can say, well, that's Georgia Tech. You give him our athletes, and like he would run circles around Mike Bobo. We don't know that. Maybe it's a different offense. Like, he has a dual threat quarterback. It's very different. Now, one thing I will say is, like, I have been in favor of maybe an offensive reset. I want us to only recruit dual threat quarterbacks from now on. And I do have questions like, can Mike Bobo coach an offense with a dual threat quarterback? Because he's never really done it in his life. So if that was your argument, hey, I want to get rid of Mike Bobo not because he doesn't do a good job, because I think he does a good job as offensive coordinator, if you can't tell by now. But if you want to say, you know what, he does a good job running the system, but we need to change the system, I could listen to that argument. I could listen to that because I do want to evolve our offense in terms of using more dual threat quarterbacks. I think you're tying your one arm behind your back and trying to coach that way when you don't have a dual threat quarterback. I think it's just too much they can do for you that you cannot do without one of those guys. But if Buster Faulkner is the guy you want to replace him with, I mean, really, what makes you think he's better than Mike Bobo? Like, what has he done in his career, calling plays, which is not as extensive as Mike Bobo's career, but what has he done to make you think that he is going to be any better than Mike Bobo has been for Georgia? And again, is he the best that Georgia can do? Really? Georgia Tech's offensive coordinator? I don't know. I throw that question right back at you. And the last talking point I hear a lot, all right, is that Mike Bobo's play calling is predictable. And this one is the part that gets me. I hear these in combination. He's predictable and he's, quote, not creative. Honestly, man, I'm at a loss with that. I've never really quite understood what people mean when they say this. Like, I get what the term predictable means. I know what creative means in general, but I don't know how it really applies to Mike Bobo here. And I don't know because when you press people on that, they can't really provide you specifics. And they don't really back it up with data. They just say, well, I just, well, if we throw it on first down, then like we'll run it on second down every time. And it's like, well, okay, well, if that's true, where's the data? Well, I mean, you just watch the game. It's like, well, yeah, that to you, maybe you think that, but where's the data to support that? If the data's out there, let me see it. Let me see it, and I'll listen. I'll have an open mind. I'm asking you to have an open mind as well. Or I hear this a lot too, not this year. Oh man, well, we're just going to throw another screen pass. Well, they're RPOs primarily when we're throwing the screen passes. We're tagging our runs with RPOs because, against Kentucky, everyone was screaming bloody murder because we were running into stacked boxes and we weren't having success. So Mike Bobo, give him credit here, right? Like he adjusted and said, well, maybe we shouldn't run into as many stacked boxes like we did against Clemson in the first half of that game and against Kentucky where we almost lost. So let's try to adjust a little bit here and let's tag a lot of these runs with RPOs. So when the opposing defense does bring extra bodies in the box, instead of running into it, which made everybody so angry against Kentucky and had people calling for his job then, we're going to pull it and throw it out the perimeter where we have numbers out there. That's the idea. He's basically trying to answer all the criticisms of him back in the early part of the season and doing that. But that's not good enough. No matter what he does, it's just not good enough, which again is kind of my point here. So this is where I will go to the tape to showcase just a couple of examples of Mike Bobo being very creative last Saturday night against Tennessee, at least as I define creativity in an offensive coordinator, and some of the biggest moments of the night in that huge win over Tennessee. So let's go to the tape. Guys, let's start off with this play. So this is when Georgia's down 2-7, trying to go up by 4 points here with a second touchdown about halfway through the second quarter. This is a critical situation. It's second goal. Yeah, we're on the 4-yard line, but this is a really good Tennessee defense. And a Tennessee defense that's really, really good stopping the run, only allowing 100 yards rushing per game coming into this game. So we've got to get 7 here. In a game like this, you cannot just get to the 4-yard line and kick field goals and say, hey, that was a successful possession. You need 6. And Mike Bobo right here in a critical situation dials up what I believe is a very creative play call. So let's watch this play out, and then I'll break it down for you guys after the fact. A little play action here. Touchdown back in the end zone to Oscar Down. Now this end zone angle is an even better angle. So what you're going to see here that I find to be very creative, and got Kirk Herbstreit that is pointing this out right now. He's exactly right. This is Monroe Freeling. That is your starting left tackle. This is a tackle over play. And so then you have right here, this is Lawson Lucky, basically functioning as your left tackle, because this right here is Dylan Fairchild, that's your left guard. This is Jared Wilson, that's your center. This is where your left tackle normally is. So you've got right here one of your tight ends, and you've now moved your left tackle, Monroe Freeling, over, tackle over. So if you're a defense, what is this doing to you? Well, Georgia a couple of times already has run this toss play. Ran a couple of times against Ole Miss, trying to get the perimeter against that really good defensive front, and we'd already run it a couple of times against Tennessee in this game, setting up this play. So this is good. This is good offensive play calling. That's what this is. So if you think Mike Bobo sucks as a play caller, this is evidence to the contrary. I'm not saying every play call is perfect, but this is fantastic. It's not just about this play call. It's how you got to it. He set this up by running these perimeter run plays, toss like this, a couple of times before this play in this game and in earlier games as well. And then on top of that, you moved your left tackle over here, giving the further impression that we are going to toss it into the boundary. I know Mike Bobo gets a lot of crap about tosses into the boundary. Well, here he's playing into it. He's playing right into it, and you put your tackle over here. So now what do the Tennessee defenders think? Oh, my God. Well, Georgia loves the boundary toss. They've run it a couple times already. We've already seen it. He's shown it to us. And now you put your left tackle over there? Well, yeah, if I'm the Tennessee defensive line, if I'm a linebacker, if I'm a safety, what am I thinking? I'm thinking they're going to toss in the boundary. And that's exactly what Mike Bobo wants them to think. He has them right where he wants them. Gives a little play action here. Carson's great at play action, opens things up. And then you run your man Oscar Delp. Had a huge game of the year for him, to the back of the end zone for a touchdown. Watch how the defense responds to this play action. Watch that. Let's go back and run this again. Look at this. Look how fast, how aggressive they're pursuing. Mike Bobo showed them exactly what he wanted them to show, or what he wanted to show them, and he got them to react the exact way he wanted them to react with just a dash of creativity. Now, you might not think that's creative. I personally think that's creative play calling. If that's not, then I don't know what creative play calling really is. Let it play out there. Touchdown. Beautiful. All right, next play here. And I started from here because I want you to see both these plays actually. We call play in the huddle, and then we rush to line of scrimmage because we're trying to deceive them a little bit. There's deception here. So we don't want them time to think. We want them flustered. We want them moving around the snap, not know exactly what to do, thinking too much. And this is gorgeous. So watch what he's doing. Couple things. Right, number one, the most obvious thing is Arian Smith here going in motion. But watch it. First, he's lined up normally. It's just a condensed set, right? But then he's going to duck down. This is craftiness at its finest by an offensive coordinator. He tells Arian Smith, I want you to duck down. Like, act like you're hiding. Make it obvious. Make it obvious that you're trying to hide, that they think you're trying to hide, but it's obvious to them. They can see it, because now Tennessee is saying, oh, he's hiding. And watch, they're pointing it out. He just pointed it out right here. He's pointing it out right there. Safety's pointing it out. They're all pointing. Oh, Arian Smith, watch, he's trying to hide. He's getting down. He's trying to hide. So they're all looking at Arian Smith, right? And now we're setting Arian Smith in motion, even further playing into it. Watch their eyes. Watch how they're shifting, right? They're still pointing at him, right? They've now shifted in that direction. Mike Bobo, man, this is beautiful. This is creativity. You might not like him. You got to give the man his flowers here. Give him his props. So watch how they're moving. And then you run play action back to the opposite side, away from the original motion, to Benjamin Urosic. Now, I'm not done with how creative this is. That's just part one of this. Let's look at part two. Even more deception. All right, so Urosic is going to pull across the line of scrimmage at the snap, opposite Arian Smith's motion, and he's going to run into the flat here. So this is kind of a variation of what we call toothpick in our offense. I've broken this down a couple times over the years. It's basically a tight end RPO. It's part of our tight end RPO series. We run toothpick, we run floss. Floss would be where he lines up on this side and he just runs out in the flat. He doesn't go behind line of scrimmage. Toothpick is where he actually goes across the line of scrimmage. But what makes this different is we run toothpick a lot. We haven't done it as much this year without Brock Bowers, but it's been a staple of our offense for a couple of years, going back with Tom Monken and Brock Bowers. But almost every time that we have run toothpick or floss in the past 3 years, certainly last year and this year as well, the tight end that we're throwing the toothpick route to is lined up off the line of scrimmage in an H-back position almost every single time. I truly don't know, guys. I done this podcast for 10 years, and I break down the film every single week, and during the offseason, I go back and rewatch every game multiple times, all right? I do a lot of film study of this stuff, and I cannot remember. I can't say with any sort of definitiveness here because I have to go back and pull up all the tape, but off the top of my head, I do not recall ever seeing us run toothpick with an inline tight end that's attached to the line of scrimmage, which is exactly where Benjamin Urosic is here. Almost every time I can remember seeing it, we run toothpick with a guy right here at the H-back position off the line of scrimmage, not attached to it. So you've got one level of deception here with Arian Smith getting down like he's trying to hide, making it obvious that he's trying to hide, and it gets the attention, exactly what Mike Bobo wants, goes cross line of scrimmage. And then the second layer of this is Urosic. If they see him in line, there's a number of routes that we run with our tight ends from an inline position. This is not one of them. Toothpick is not one of them. So when they see this, they see Arian Smith go into motion, they're not even thinking, oh, wait, Georgia might try to deceive us here and bring Urosic back behind the line of scrimmage and into the flat. They're not thinking that because we've never shown that. This is Mike Bobo throwing a wrinkle into this that he's never shown before and being very creative in the process of doing it. And in doing so, creates a huge play for Georgia that sets up our final decisive score. Already up by 7, this essentially puts the game away. Ices it. Put it at the 2-yard line. We punch it in from there. That's straight up gorgeous play calling. That's creativity, guys. Look, I know the reality is that if you are a Mike Bobo hater, and if you don't want to classify yourself as a Mike Bobo hater, if you want to call yourself a Mike Bobo skeptic, whatever, right? Semantics. No matter what I say, and no matter how many data points, no matter how many film clips I throw at you to support the notion that maybe, just maybe, Mike Bobo isn't this failure that some of you are firmly convinced that he is, you're just not going to hear me. I know that's the reality. So this entire video is probably just an exercise in futility. But at some point, when you run a Georgia podcast for a decade, as I have, you live in Athens, you're a diehard Georgia guy, and you hear these things over and over and over again, you just get tired of the blind hate. And I usually just let people do their thing. But at some point, you feel like you got to step up and say your piece, which is what I'm doing here. And look, I'm not saying the guy is perfect. I don't think that's the case at all. I have been critical. If you've been listening to our podcast for a while, you know I've been critical of certain aspects of his coaching at times. I think by and large, he does a really, really good job running this system. I don't really have an issue with his play calling. I don't think, honestly, that I'm qualified to criticize his play calling. Guys, I'm just telling you, at the college level, like, I know football, you know football. At that level, it's PhD level stuff. Like, I'm not qualified to criticize individual play calls the way that maybe another coach would be, at least in my humble opinion. But my biggest gripe, I do think I'm qualified to at least throw this out there. My biggest gripe has been personnel usage. I do think it's fair to argue that offensively, certainly this year, maybe not as much last year, but certainly this year, we aren't always featuring our most talented players on offense or maximizing the skill sets of certain guys like a Benjamin Urosic, for example, who had the fourth most receiving yards from the tight end position of any tight ends in all of college football over the last 3 years behind Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, and Dalton Kincaid. And this guy, we tried to make him an inline tight end for the first half of the year, and we're just now finally realizing, oh, wait, maybe this guy can make plays for us. So if you want to criticize personnel usage, I'm with you there. Again, I don't think the guy's like infallible. Like, I'm not saying he's beyond reproach. I just think that the criticism of Mike Bobo is it's too much, man. It's over the top. It's overkill. And I don't think it's really rooted in reality, personally. And I can't defend every single play call. I will say that. I cannot defend every single play call. But if that's the standard we're going to hold offensive coordinators to, that every single play call has to be perfect, then, guys, there's no such thing as a good offensive coordinator. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't. So I'll close with this. Think what you want. Who am I to tell you what to think? I'm just trying to give you something to think about here. All I would ask is that you just have an open mind and really genuinely consider all the facts, all the context before you fire up the keyboard the next time to go call for Mike Bobo's job on a message board or somewhere on social media. So just some food for thought. I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. I sincerely appreciate it. Again, if you're new to the show, make sure to check out the Glory UJ podcast, wherever you get your podcast, for a lot more coverage of Georgia football and Georgia sports in general. If you enjoyed this video and you want more content like this, please subscribe to this channel right now as we continue to try to grow this channel. Been doing the podcast for 10 years, just been getting this YouTube channel going over the last 4 or 5 months. So would greatly appreciate your help there. So comment, like, subscribe, all of that. Thank you guys so much. But I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.